In the 19th century, a Jewish family from Baghdad, seeking refuge from persecution, would rise to dominate one of the most powerful and controversial trades in human history: opium. Fleeing their homeland, the Sassoons didn't just survive. They built an empire. They resettled in British-controlled Bombay, a bustling port city that would soon become the heart of their vast operations. The air in Bombay was thick with the scent of spices, the sound of 100 languages, and the promise of immense fortune for those bold enough to seize it. Here, in the vibrant chaos of colonial India, David Sassoon and his sons saw an opportunity where others saw only risk. The British Empire had a problem. It was buying enormous quantities of tea, silk, and porcelain from China, but China wanted little in return, except for silver. This created a massive trade deficit that was draining Britain's treasury. The solution was as cynical as it was profitable: opium. Grown in the poppy fields of India, this highly addictive drug became the key to unlocking China's wealth. The Sassoons plunged into this dark trade. They weren't just merchants. They were visionaries of a grim new economy. They financed the cultivation of poppies, oversaw the processing of raw opium into a marketable product, and built a fleet of ships to transport their cargo across the seas. Their efficiency was ruthless, their ambition boundless. Before long, the Sassoon family controlled an astonishing 70% of the entire opium trade flowing from India to China. Their name became synonymous with the drug, their ships a dreaded sight on the horizon. For the British Empire, the Sassoons were indispensable partners. The opium trade was more than just business. It was an instrument of state policy. By flooding China with opium, Britain reversed the trade deficit, turning a river of silver that once flowed out of the empire into a torrent flowing back in. Opium became Britain's weapon, and the Sassoons were its most effective arms dealers. Addiction was traded for silver, and the balance of power in Asia was irrevocably altered. But as the Sassoon fortune grew, a devastating human crisis unfolded in China. In the dimly lit, smoke-filled opium dens that sprang up across the country, millions of lives were consumed by addiction. Families were torn apart, communities were hollowed out, and the fabric of Chinese society began to unravel. The Qing government, seeing its people and its treasury being destroyed, issued desperate edicts banning the drug. But it was too late. The tide of opium, backed by the military might of the British Empire, was unstoppable. While China suffered, the prophets of pain built palaces. Back in Bombay, the Sassoons' wealth was on full display. They erected magnificent mansions that blended European and Indian architectural styles, grand testaments to their commercial power. Their name was emblazoned on docks, warehouses, and libraries, the physical infrastructure of their empire. The city itself was being shaped by their success, its skyline rising on the back of a trade that was destroying a nation half a world away. The contrast was stark. Opulent ballrooms in Bombay, funded by the despair of opium dens in Canton. But the Sassoons were masters of more than just trade. They were masters of public perception. They understood that a controversial fortune needed a new narrative. With a strategic genius that matched their business acumen, they began to channel their immense profits into philanthropy. They poured their drug money into building hospitals that would heal the sick, schools that would educate the poor, and public works that would benefit all of Bombay's citizens. In an act of incredible historical irony, the men who trafficked in addiction became celebrated as great benefactors. They were washing their reputation in generosity, laundering the source of their wealth through acts of public good. Their social ascent was just as calculated. They became known as the Rothschilds of the East, a title that spoke to both their immense wealth and their Jewish heritage. They cultivated close relationships with the British elite, hosting lavish banquets where colonial governors and high-ranking officials were frequent guests. They understood that power wasn't just about money, it was about access and acceptance. To secure their dynasty's future, they looked towards the heart of the empire, London. Through a series of strategic marriages, the Sassoon sons and daughters joined the ranks of the British aristocracy. They married into prominent families, forging bonds of blood and class that integrated them into the upper echelons of society. Their wealth, which once flowed from the ports of Asia, now bought them country estates in the English countryside and opulent townhouses in London's most fashionable districts. They were invited to royal ceremonies, received knighthoods from the Queen, and became fixtures of high society. By the dawn of the 20th century, their transformation was complete. The memory of the opium clippers and the desperate pleas of the Chinese government had faded, replaced by the image of respected English gentlemen. They were no longer seen as traders of a dangerous narcotic, but as pillars of the British establishment. Their wealth, their power, their very name seemed untouchable, sanitized by time and charity. The Sassoons had successfully rewritten their own history. But, as the story of empires, families, and fortunes so often shows, foundations built on the suffering of others are rarely stable. The legacy of the opium trade would cast a long, dark shadow over the 20th century, a stark reminder that even the most carefully constructed legacies cannot entirely escape the judgment of history. Every dynasty that rises on fragile foundations must one day fall. For the Sassoons, a name that once echoed with unimaginable power and wealth, decline came not from powerful enemies or market crashes, but from within. Their story is a stark reminder that even the greatest empires can crumble under their own weight. The seeds of their downfall were sown at the height of their power. Greed, that timeless human flaw, began to divide the family. As the patriarchs passed on, the successors quarreled bitterly over control of the vast empire. They were consumed by internal rivalries, fighting over pieces of a kingdom while the world outside their gilded cage was rapidly changing. While they were busy plotting against one another, their vast holdings, stretching from the ports of Bombay to the financial heart of London, grew increasingly vulnerable. The political tides were shifting, and the very trade that had built their fortune was facing a growing wave of public condemnation. For decades, the Sassoons had dominated the opium trade, a business that brought them staggering profits but inflicted immeasurable suffering. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, the world began to awaken to the horrors of this trade. Social reform movements gained momentum, and protests erupted in the streets. The moral landscape was redrawn, and what had once made the Sassoons unimaginably rich was now becoming a source of deep and public shame. The family, once celebrated as titans of commerce, were now being branded as merchants of misery. Their name, once a symbol of success, was now stained. The final blows came swiftly, striking at the very heart of their empire. The end of colonial power, particularly in Asia, signaled the end of the world that had allowed their business to flourish. When India, the crown jewel of their operations, finally gained its hard-won independence in 1947, the new government moved to reclaim its economic sovereignty. The Sassoon Empire's assets, their mills, their docks, their grand properties, were nationalized. The immense wealth they had painstakingly built over a century began to vanish, almost overnight. What took generations to build was undone in a matter of years. From Baghdad to Bombay to London, their fortune dissolved into the pages of history. The grand estates fell silent, the bustling offices emptied, and the once mighty Sassoon name faded from the headlines. What they left behind is a legacy of profound contradiction. They were known for their immense charity, funding hospitals, schools, and synagogues that still stand today. But this philanthropy was born from immense suffering, the profits of a trade that destroyed countless lives and families. As we look at the landmarks they funded, we see more than just stone and mortar. These are monuments not just to their generosity, but to the lives that were sacrificed to build them. They are a testament to a complicated past, where philanthropy was used to wash away the sins of commerce. The story of the Sassoon Empire reminds us that while time and money can often buy respectability, they can never erase the fundamental truth of how that wealth was made. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the events and figures that shaped our world. We'll see you next time.